In 2014, one of the most talked about movies was the romance thriller Gone Girl, based off the book of the same name by Gillian Flynn. Its subversive analysis of a faux suburban relationship resonated with audiences to the extent that when the David Fincher movie was released, it became one of the most successful adult-targeted films of the year. It also helped that Flynn wrote that movie's screenplay, which showed that she might not be a one-trick pony, and many studios quickly snapped up the movie rights to her other adult-oriented novels. The first one out following the aftermath of Gone Girl is an adaptation of her 2009 book Dark Places, with some big name stars clearly eager to be involved in the next Gone Girl style success. The Dark Places book has been critically well received and was a bestseller, but for some reason the movie hasn't been met with nearly that level of acclaim. In fact, distributors have buried this movie, with it only being released in one theatre in the UK before being released on demand and on DVD a month later. Is this because Dark Places isn't very good, or was it too dark for mainstream audiences and should be enjoyed by a Netflix crowd? In the 1980s, Libby Day was the sole survivor of a massacre that resulted in the death of her entire family, save for her brother, who she testified against and has been imprisoned ever since. She lives life as an antisocial wreck who relies on donations and book sales, capitalizing on the event until she's found by Lyle Worth, who is part of a kill club, which specializes in solving murder cases in the group's spare time. They believe that Libby's brother Ben was not responsible for the killings, and they pay Libby to help with their investigation. Was Libby wrong all of those years ago? And if so, just who was responsible for the death of her family? Dark Places has a solid setup for a mystery thriller, but the most interesting part of the story is actually Libby's circumstances when we first meet her. It's 25 years after the event that's been dubbed the Kansas Prairie Massacre, and Libby Day, as its sole survivor, has been coasting on her infamy by living off of donations, earning money from a book about her life that she didn't even write or even read, and is hoping more money will come from the 30th anniversary as her funds are drying up. It's an incredibly unique and interesting angle, and I would have loved to have seen a story based solely around that premise. But there's a mystery to be solved, and Libby needs money, so she offers to help the Kill Club with their investigation, and this is one part of a two-pronged narrative. Dark Places takes place in two time periods. One, 25 years ago to show the events leading up to the massacre, and two, Libby investigating with the Kill Club in the present day. This isn't so bad, as we could have Libby discovering something and then having it clarified by a flashback, but this structural choice is where Dark Places has its biggest stumble. See, it's very rare that the flashbacks bear any sort of resemblance to what is happening in the present day, meaning that Dark Places has a continually disruptive pace, and because we're dealing with so many separate parts, it makes the story far more convoluted and complex than it ideally should be. And while I have been using the term flashback, that is not an entirely accurate word, because the events that the audience see 25 years ago do not take place from Libby's perspective. In fact, many of them are events that Libby can't possibly have known about. This is a problem because it results in a huge disconnect between Libby and the audience, as we are privy to information that she doesn't know yet. As a result, we're not discovering Libby's story with Libby, making what should be an engaging story of discovery into something rather passive and hard to follow. Maybe if we had flashbacks that were only from the perspective of young Libby, or from the perspective of someone telling her the events, then we could understand why she made the testimony that she did when she was 7 or 8, but we get no such vantage point. Although one vantage point that we are given is a very strange found footage segment where Libby seems to be recording certain events one night on an old camera, and then adult Libby wakes up from a dream. So, does Libby dream in found footage? What's all that about? Another aspect of the story that makes it tough to understand is just how dumb many of the characters are. Throughout the movie, I was wondering whether or not certain loose ends would be tied up, or if certain actions and behaviours would be explained, but once the credits rolled, I realised that the truth was far more frustrating: that everyone involved is an idiot. To explain why would be going deep into spoiler territory, so I'll have to be vague, but many characters take such extreme measures in the face of perfectly reasonable scenarios. People act out of character just so things can turn out badly. The intelligence of characters fluctuates based on the needs of the plot, and one of the key components of the final mystery is offhandedly introduced about half an hour in, and no one wonders whether or not that factor should be considered until near the very end. Also, without spoiling the ending entirely, if you actually know anything about life insurance or inheritances, you will realise that the ending should never have played out the way it did. All of these elements add up to a movie that never fully engages. Was I curious as to how the story would turn out? Admittedly, yes, but that's mainly because I rented the movie and wanted to sit through it all to get my money's worth. We do have a lot of potential themes at play, such as the living conditions of farmers, childhood abuse, exploring the satanic panic from the 1980s, and false criminal allegations, but it's in service of a movie that has very little to say about these themes and a main character who stubbornly refuses to change. Which brings me to Libby Day, who isn't exactly a bad protagonist, and Charlize Theron plays the role of a hardened, pessimistic, broken woman very, very well, but she does very little growing throughout Dark Places. In fact, her growth is relegated to numerous characters telling her that she is growing and changing. Friends and strangers frequently tell her that she's trying to find peace or escape her demons or discover the truth, but none of Libby's actions actually support this. Libby's only here for the money initially, and many of the twists and turns that she finds throughout the film just fall on her lap. So at the end, it's hard to believe that anything has actually changed internally with this character, other than the knowledge that she has garnered over the past 112 minutes, no matter how much Libby's far too frequent voiceover narration tries to imply. Thankfully, the cast are mostly strong, with them committing wholeheartedly to some incredibly ridiculous moments, particularly Chloe Grace Moretz and Ty Sheridan, who do get some phenomenally cheesy interactions that border on the unintentionally funny. It's not because of their performances, but because of the dialogue and ridiculous scenarios. Christina Hendricks does well as Libby's mother, though there's not much to her character, and the same goes for Nicholas Hoult, who is all too frequently reduced to exposition. And while Corey Stoll is good, he's given a very flat character. Oddly enough, despite the weak characterization in Dark Places, the cast do elevate the material to a certain extent, and the child actors are particularly good across the board. Really, all the components for an effective mystery are here, and it's clear that there must be something to the source material, which I've not read, just to clarify, but maybe something got lost in translation here. Maybe the flashback formatting worked better on the page than it does on the screen. Maybe the inner monologue of Libby was profound in the book. Maybe it is a literal translation issue, as the director is French, whose last movie also revolved around a past and present narrative adapted from a book that wasn't very good either. Either way, it's hard to view Dark Places as anything other than a missed opportunity, especially with this cast assembled. Production-wise, it's not too badly put together, though it does feel like an on-demand release as opposed to a big screen experience like Gone Girl. It's unreasonable to compare the director to David Fincher, but Dark Places does have a lot of atmosphere and is balancing a lot of locations, settings and characters, so the ambition is admirable. We've got a lot of extras with decent makeup effects, but if you're going into Dark Places expecting the next Gone Girl, you are going to leave very disappointed. And looking back at the limited marketing campaign for Dark Places, it kept on using that connection to Gone Girl as its sole hook, probably because the final movie doesn't have that much worth selling, which explains its buried on-demand release. So after all of that, here's my conclusion. Dark Places, with its core premise, while interesting, is diluted with a dull narrative. Its characters are either stupid or flatly written despite good talent being brought on board to portray them, and it's really hard to get invested in a movie that feels so emotionally distant despite a few themes that would have been well worth exploring. The ideas are here, and part of me is glad that I rented it, but anyone other than the most devoted thriller mystery fans should avoid. I give Dark Places 2 stars out of 5.
You lied. I lied.
Everybody's a liar.
It's time you tell the truth.
Sad for you, little girl. You're just as imprisoned as I am.
Hey folks, thanks for listening to my review. You can find these reviews a day early on my website, so be sure to visit www.trilbee.com regularly, where you can find a written version. I'm just experimenting with a new format, so let me know if you like these audio reviews to complement the written ones. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. But more importantly, what did you think of the film? Be sure to let me know in the comment section below. Be sure to subscribe for more movie-related analysis. Please hit that like button, as it really helps me out, and you can support my content through Patreon for exclusive perks and rewards and updates. I'll see you folks next time.